Mr. Sloan, so I mentioned in my opening statement you're under, you've been fined by every one of your federal regulators. You've entered into consent decrees with every one of these federal regulators. So how many consent decrees total have you entered into?
It's my count that we have approximately 14 that are open right now.
14. How many customer accounts are we talking about?
Related to what?
Well, you define it.
Well, it depends on the underlying issue. For the retail sales practices issue, we engaged an outside third party to look at over 165 million accounts, and what we concluded that there could have been, but not necessarily were, up to 3.5 million accounts that were open inappropriately. Okay. We've reached out to those customers, and my guess is that once we complete that remediation, the number will be smaller than that.
So when do you plan to complete that remediation on those 3.5 million customers?
I'm sorry?
When do you plan to complete that remediation for those 3.8 million customers?
So we've completed that remediation for those customers. In addition, we've entered into the settlement of a class action suit, and customers have an additional opportunity to be part of that suit. And then once those payments are made, we'll have a better idea in terms of number.
So 14 separate consent decrees with your regulators. You talk about confidential supervisory information. That means that you have ongoing conversations with your regulators that you can't disclose to us in a public setting. Understand the law. We constructed that law. We created these regulators. And so that means you have ongoing conversations. So let me just ask this broad question. You're the CEO of a major American company. Does the buck stop with you?
Absolutely.
So what are you doing to change your culture in your 2.5-year reign? I can hold you accountable, and the public, your shareholders, your board of directors should hold you accountable and are for your actions as CEO. What are you doing to change the culture?
Well, the first thing we've done, or that I did when I took the responsibility as CEO, is to take responsibility for our past actions.
How are you changing that frontline culture? Those people that my constituents interact with in a branch bank in North Carolina, how are you changing that culture? Because those are the ones, not North Carolina, interestingly, but those broadly across your footprint, established Wells footprint, those are the ones that took the action. How are you changing that culture?
So in our retail banking business, this is what we've done. We've changed the leadership. Right? We ended the incentive plan that drove inappropriate behavior. We changed, we increased the amount of training that we give to our team members called Change for the Better. We've improved the products and services that we've been encouraging them to work with their customers over. And we've also delegated more responsibility for them in terms of resolving customer issues. The feedback that we get from
I understand the feedback. We've gotten your written statement. So can you give me your personal assurance that this is the end of customer harm?
I can't promise you perfection, but what I can promise you is that the changes that we've implemented, the substantive changes that we've implemented since I became CEO, are going to prevent them from occurring as best we can. Centralizing our risk and control functions, right, is a fundamental change in our company. The way that we get information today is different that we get information. The way that we share.
You've been fined $4 billion.
I'm sorry?
You've been fined by your federal regulators $4 billion. Do you think that's sufficient or adequate?
I think that the reputational damage that our company has endured because of our mistakes has created significant damage to the company, and that it's my job as CEO to make sure things change, and they are changing.
Okay. Your personal assurance.
Yes.
You've entered into 14 consent decrees by what you just said publicly. Can you give this committee and the public assurance that you will comply with all of those consent decrees on a going forward basis?
I absolutely will.
And you will give your personal attestation that you will follow those consent decrees.
Our team is working very hard to respond to
Will you give us that assurance that you will follow the letter of the regulator's consent decree entered into with your bank?
We will do our absolute best to comply with
And is
every
this the
provision.
end of scandal at Wells? Are we going to see more headlines coming up, and we're going to have another hearing about this?
I can't control the media, but
Are your customers going to hear more of bad actions taken by your company?
there's nothing else that I'm aware of that we haven't disclosed. And we changed the standard of disclosure at Wells Fargo after I became CEO. It's not a materiality level of disclosure anymore. It's one of reputation.
The gentlewoman from New York.